Hi guys, welcome to this week's lecture, which is all about descriptives in graphing. I've got to say this is one of my favorite lectures to date. I know we're only a few lectures in, but it's one of the most important skills that you'll learn when it comes to being able to apply it with a data set that you don't know. So when you have a new data as a researcher, one of the first questions you're trying to ask is, what are the measures? What are the distribution of my participants within these measures? Does it make sense? Are there any values that are out of range or not plausible? Descriptives really allow you to get an understanding of the answers to these questions. So that it's really, really important to be able to understand what descriptives are important for what type of variables, and then also being able to plot that through graphing. And that allows others to look at your data through the graphs and get a good sense of the core messages. So really a very, very important lecture that we're going to be covering today. But before we go into that, a quick recap of what we did in the last lecture. We talked about the research process. We talked about types of surveys and their administration in terms of whether they're interview administered or whether they're self-administered. We talked about survey design, levels of measurement in terms of nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, sampling, and also biases that can occur within survey item design. Now, I guess some homework from last week, if you want to call it that, more food for thought, or things that I had you think about and apply to the questions at hand for the content that you were learning. I wanted you to create some items to measure extroversion. So have some questions or items that allowed you to measure extroversion using each of these different formats. So hopefully you've had a bit of time to think about it. If not, pause the video, work through these formats and try to have a think of what item would be appropriate for each, because that'll really allow you to solidify your understanding of each of these different formats. So we'll go through it together now, assuming you've done it. So try and come up with some of these ideas. One example for dichotomous. For extroversion, this is where you have two response options. So you could say, are you extroverted, yes or no? Or if it's multichotomous, you could have an item that says, do you enjoy the following activities? Going to the park and meeting up with a friend, going to a party, or reading a book, right? So you have each of these activities and you have to select one. So there's multiple options to select from. The multiple response would actually allow you to select many of those, and you select all that apply. So maybe you like all of those responses, and so you would be able to select all of them. Ranking is where you would have a series of those responses and you'd be ranking each of them. So you could say, I really enjoy reading a book, and then I also enjoy catching up with a friend for coffee, and then I also enjoy going to parties, and so you rank them as a function of that. And so that's the ranking. Verbal frequency could be something like, how often have you thought about, or how often are you likely to meet new people in the last 6 months, or strike up a conversation with someone new. And so that allows a bit of context into the number of interactions that would have occurred. And so that's verbal frequency. Likert is where you have the scale of strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. So you could have any item there. You could say, I enjoy going to parties, and then you have the Likert scale there. Or you could say, I tend to talk to other people that I don't know, and the Likert scale is there. And all of these sort of items could be created around the Likert scale. Semantic differential is where you have the two opposite words, and then you would sort of rate which one you linked more to. So fun and outgoing, or more introvert, I guess another word for introverted. So you'd be looking at something like more recharge within yourself. And this is probably the best example I've found of introversion and extroversion. Is extroverts typically feel energized around others, and introverts feel energized around activities that sort of nourish themselves, and so that can be a way in which you're creating items there. Graphical could be something as simple as having introverted and extroverted on a line, on a continuum, and someone places an X where they fit on that line. And then nonverbal is where you have some images of, say, someone who is engaging in introverted or extroverted activities, and the person responds as to which of those images aligns with their personality. So that is each of the different survey items and their design. And so I also wanted you to think a bit about how you would administer a survey on, say, prejudice and discrimination, right? So in what ways would you be administering that survey? Would it be interview administered, or would it be self-administered? And hopefully here, the guiding principle you're thinking of is the sensitivity of the responses that someone is providing here. So for prejudice and discrimination, maybe if it was interview administered, the respondent would be less likely to give you their true responses in relation to that content. So it might be best to have a self-administered survey in that regard, so they feel like they could write freely without fear of judgment or someone observing them. Again, for children's favorite toys, here you'd be doing an interview administered survey because you would want to be assisting the child with completing the survey. And in some cases, maybe they would need certain types in that survey design section of the type of survey items. Maybe they need more images, and less, if they can't read, they would need those images there to be able to map onto. And then for experiences of individuals living in remote areas, here you're trying to access lots of different people in remote areas. So self-administered would be best to be able to actually get the survey to those areas and allow them to complete that survey. So we have examples where self-administered has pros of allowing people to complete it in their own environment without someone observing them to ensure that they're providing their responses, and it has access to people in different locations. And then the interview administered surveys have the pros of being able to help for people who may not be able to complete the survey alone. And so that's where we have those examples there. And that's why I say, most importantly, justify your answers. As with everything in this course, it's all about justification. So the more you can say, this is why I think this survey method is appropriate, the better your sort of rationale and response will be. And this is what I'm looking for in this course, and hopefully what you're developing as a researcher. And again, you can apply this to sampling methods. Man, I gave you a lot of homework. So hopefully you're doing okay. So how would you recruit participants for a study on ecstasy use among students? So here you're thinking, would it be probability sampling or non-probability sampling? How would you sort of identify which would be most appropriate? Well, here you have a target population in mind, and so you have ecstasy use amongst students, so you'd probably go the non-probability sampling route so that you're able to identify those who are relevant to your study. And you could perhaps so there's purposive sampling, and then perhaps you could have some sort of snowball sampling as well if they know others who are engaging in behaviors that would allow them to be included in that study. Comparing cognitive abilities of pregnant and non-pregnant women, again, you have a desired population in mind, which is women who are pregnant or women who are not pregnant, and you're comparing cognitive abilities. So you could do possibly both. So you could do the probability sampling and get a sample of, say, all of Australia, and then have inclusion-exclusion criteria that allows you to select the people for your study that are appropriate. So women who are pregnant or not pregnant. So or you could do, there could be rationale to allow for some sort of non-probability sampling if you're trying to identify you going to mothers groups, or you're getting referrals from people who are in maternity wards, or you're using sampling within your local environment. There's pros and cons for each. Of course, with probability, you're getting more diversity in your sample, more representative of the target population. So that's the advantage that you have there, and so that's where you could select either or. I think there's justifications for either or. So hopefully that one wasn't causing too much trouble for you. Polling Australia's voting intentions. This is something that I think probability is definitely what you're after. You're trying to get your representative sample of Australia and get a sense of their voting. So that's the justification I have for my answers. Hopefully that matches your justification. If not, let me know what your justification was. So the focus or overview of today, what we're going to be looking at is getting to know a data set, levels of measurements and types of statistics, descriptive statistics, normal and non-normal distributions, the effect of skew on central tendency, principles of graphing, and univariate graphical techniques. So we're really going through the entire pipeline of you have a data set someone's given you or that you've collected yourself. How do you get a sense or understanding of that data set? What are the measures that are there? How do we understand the distribution of those measures? And then plotting and graphing those variables. So that I think is a good place to stop. I think we'll pause there, and then when we regroup, we'll come back into the steps for each of these different pipelines. So hopefully you have a good understanding of everything that we covered in the last lecture. As I said before, these lectures really build on one another, and so it's really important that you understand the content of the previous weeks so that we can take that knowledge into the subsequent weeks. If there was anything in those homework activities or questions of reflections that you were struggling with or thought, oh, maybe actually I didn't fully understand that, please go back to the content, revisit it, and read up a bit more in terms of some of the concepts you may need further understanding about, and then build that into coming back to these lectures, because that'll help with translating your knowledge across to the different lectures in this in this course. In saying that, have a break. Treat yourself to a tea, and we'll come back in a moment. I'll see you soon.